So what I will do is I'm going to call to order an informal meeting of the Planning and Zoning Board for December 4th, 2018, since we don't have a quorum. Morgan, would you like to call roll?
Yes. Raymond Layton.
Here.
Sonny Luzo.
Here.
Karen Beatty.
Here.
Don Black.
Here.
Willie Newkirk. Carol Williams. Pat Doherty. Jeffrey Midget. Jerry Walker.
Here.
Marshall Ballard. Mr. Chair, we do not have a quorum this evening.
Okay, thank you. Understanding that, this evening we will not be having any voting on official items, so we will not be dealing with item 2 on the agenda, which is approval of minutes from previous meetings. Likewise, we will not be hearing any information about the plan unit development and general plan by Nolan Commercial Contractors. And we will also not be adopting our 2019 meeting schedule. So tonight we will only be having our informational session for the New Bern Redevelopment Commission. So I appreciate everybody joining us this evening. However, we will be conducting no formal business this evening. Okay, Jeff, I'll turn it over to you at this point.
Yes, y'all want to hear about the redevelopment commission. All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. Members of the Commission, Jeffrey Ruggiero with Development Services, here to provide an informational presentation on the role the Planning and Zoning Commission will be playing in the future as a result of the City of New Bern forming a redevelopment commission. And the Redevelopment Commission and the Planning and Zoning Board will be, a lot of the decisions that the Redevelopment Commission need to be supported and approved by the Planning and Zoning Board. So you'll be seeing information in the future as items on your official agenda for you to take official action on, whether to approve, disapprove, or recommend changes to certain items that will be coming to you in the future. The first one that we will be presenting hopefully in your January meeting will be the adoption of a recommendation from the Redevelopment Commission to adopt the boundary area of the redevelopment area. And I put on the overhead what that boundary is, and that's from our City GIS website. Anyone can pull that up. It's under the interactive zoning map under the Development Services link, and then you go to Maps. You'll pull this up. It's a coverage called CNI Boundary. And essentially what the Redevelopment Commission did was adopt the Choice Neighborhoods Initiative boundary as the official redevelopment area. The reason why they did that is this boundary has been studied for many years now. We went through 2 multi-year planning processes for the Renaissance redevelopment plan that we went through. That was completed in 2012. And another, the CNI Choice Neighborhoods Initiative planning effort that was completed in 2014. So we have all the data that's required from the state statute level to adopt this as the boundary. So the Redevelopment Commission chose not to reinvent the wheel and simply adopted this boundary. However, the Planning and Zoning Board will have to approve that boundary too. So I'll go through, and you all have a copy of the PowerPoint. We couldn't get it to work tonight for you to see on the overhead, but you have your paper copy, and you can follow with me. I'm going to skip right over the agenda stuff and really go to that the second page that says creating a redevelopment plan and what the legal requirements are. So the Redevelopment Commission, wherever you see RC in the presentation, that's Redevelopment Commission. And so the Redevelopment Commission must ask the Planning and Zoning Board for approval for its redevelopment, for the redevelopment area and its boundaries. And in doing so, we have to make some findings also. Later on, after the boundary is completed, we will be bringing forward, the Redevelopment Commission will also be bringing forward what that plan is. The Planning and Zoning Board will have to make a determination on whether to approve or whether to recommend approval to the Board of Aldermen on that plan also. So these things will all be coming in the near future. What the Redevelopment Commission is really focused on is blight, and that's in the state statute. And there's 3 different classifications of what blight is. A redevelopment boundary can fit into all 3 or just one. of what those are. I'll go over them very quickly. First of them is a blighted area. That's strictly for residential. So you'll have to find blight, and man, I forgot the definition, but it's about 7 or 8 sentences long, but everyone knows blight when they see it. But that's strictly residential blight. Then we have another very specific non-residential blight, essentially, so commercial areas that can be blighted. And also rehabilitation, conservation, and reconditioning areas. So those are the 3 things. The rehabilitation, conservation, and reconditioning area, that pretty much says that an area is in danger of becoming blighted due to blighted conditions that exist adjacent to it or down the road, that it's reasonable to foresee that the blight will keep creeping into a certain area. So the redevelopment commission's charge is to address blight as it exists and to also implement policies that will curb or stop blight from creeping into neighborhoods that may be at risk from becoming blighted. So again, the redevelopment area just needs to fit either one or all of these conditions to be found, to be approved in the redevelopment area boundary. I'll go to this one. So the next page talks about what the blighted area is. It's a pretty robust definition, but again, you don't need a PhD in architecture or planning. There's no blight when you see it. Again, this is blighted areas are strictly residential, as the way the state statute lays it out for redevelopment commissions. But again, these areas need to substantially impair the sound growth of the community, conducive to ill health, transmission of disease, infant mortality, juvenile delinquency, and crime, and is detrimental to the public health and safety and welfare by reason of dilapidation, deterioration, its age, the physical layout of the community could be such that it prevents sound growth in the future, unsanitary, unsafe conditions, or any combination. So from a data standpoint, to find an area blighted, the Planning Commission must find that 2/3 of the buildings are of the character described and substantially contribute to the blighted condition. A blighted parcel is a little different. Blighted parcels are non-residential for the most part, and the language was put in the statute to deal with large kind of commercial complexes with more than one building on it, maybe on one parcel, but a large development that may need very specific efforts to reverse whatever problems are occurring to make it a blighted condition. You have to identify those parcel by parcel. And the reason why that's important is the Redevelopment Commission has the power of eminent domain. And in order to initiate the eminent domain proceedings, the parcel itself needs to be blighted. So you may find when we present to you the boundary and the plan that there are specific parcels within an overall blighted area that are called blighted parcels. And the reason for which is because they may be suited for eminent domain. Mr. Bates.
And so this is something, once it is declared by this commission, that it will then have to come before us.
Correct.
Okay. Okay.
The redevelopment commission does all the work. We present our findings to you, looking for approval, disapproval, or maybe you say, well, let's change it this way, or look at something, go back to the drawing board and look at whatever. But we're making a presentation to the board, and the redevelopment commission cannot move forward on any effort without the planning commission's approval. And then we have the catch-all, the rehabilitation, conservation, and reconditioning area. And again, the statutory language is the planning commission must find a clear and present danger that in absence of municipal action, the area will become in the reasonably foreseeable future a blighted area. So again, I've said it quite a few times. The planning commission must procure from the planning commission the designation of the areas in need of redevelopment. So the entire area, any parcels, that are going to be considered blighted parcels. And we cannot move forward with that, anything, until the Plan Commission makes its recommendations.
So Jeff, if I may, as a rule, anything that the commission presents to us, any applications, any findings, are we making recommendations to the Board of Aldermen for final decisions as a rule?
Correct.
Okay.
Like a rezone,
Yeah.
essentially. Yeah.
Yep.
Mhm. So after the boundary's created, we'll, the redevelopment commission will spend a little more time, in a couple months, creating what the redevelopment plan is. And there'll be a lot of P&Z action involved in that, especially as it concerns any kind of zoning changes that may be required in order to facilitate the redevelopment of the area, lot sizes, setbacks, things of this nature, enhanced code enforcement, enhanced building standards, things like that, maybe coming forward. Any kinds of changes to the street layouts, and any other additional kind of land use controls that may come forward. Looking at changes in possible uses like allowed uses. A lot of the talk thus far in the Redevelopment Commission is creating a Head Start school and health center. Both of those uses, regardless of what zoning classification they're in, would require a special use permit to get it approved. So the board will be looking at allowing those uses by right or a different type of approval possibly to get those uses in specific areas. So those are the type of zoning changes that may be coming forward inside the plan itself.
So is that something that will go before the Board of Adjustment?
Well, today it would go before the Board of
Right.
Adjustment. The Redevelopment Commission may find that they don't want that extra bureaucratic approval in the approval process. If they find that it's an important aspect of the redevelopment of the community, they may want to create an easier pathway to get that approved. To do so, we'll have to make some changes to the zoning code. And that would be specific to only areas inside the boundary. It wouldn't extend outside the boundary. But those are the types of things that may be in the redevelopment plan that the Planning Commission will have to approve of. As far as the time frame, the Planning and Zoning Board has 45 days to approve the boundary when we send it to you. And no action in 45 days is considered an automatic approval. I'm not pretty sure we don't have to worry about anything like that. So essentially that's it in a nutshell at this point in time. As we move forward in the future, there'll be a lot more detailed discussion on what we're doing and how we're doing it. But I just wanted to make sure that members of the board aren't hit cold when we present to you our redevelopment commission boundary in a month or so. And this is the time to ask the questions if you have any. If you go home and hey, I'm thinking about this, shoot me an email, shoot Morgan an email, I'll get you the answers. Just want to make sure that we're all on the same page as we move forward. This is a really important step for the redevelopment of this area. The Board of Aldermen have taken this very seriously. The Redevelopment Commission is a very powerful board that has a lot of statutory authority to make changes in a community, and we all look forward to all working together to implement a redevelopment plan that we actually can get moving on instead of talking
Right.
about it.
As far as the boundary, obviously it'll come before us, and then based on our recommendation, it'll go to the Board of Aldermen.
Yeah.
Once the Alderman approves that, I would just venture to guess, is there a mechanism for changing that boundary?
It's essentially starting over,
It's like starting over.
even
okay.
at the smallest change.
Even the small change, okay.
Correct.
All right.
Coming at this from a residence that lives in the area
Mhm.
point of view, and it's kind of a shallow thought, but bear with me for a second. When this becomes defined as a blighted area, which is pretty obvious that it's a blighted area based on what we've heard, how does that affect, say, property values? Does that affect appraisals and things like that?
That's a tough one to answer. Not sure.
And
It may. I mean, I'm not sure it could affect it in a negative way.
Right, because the
It may
idea
be
is
a
to-
positive way that there is a
Right.
plan to remove the blight,
Right.
and that certain areas may appreciate a little quicker as they're closer to a school
Yeah.
or a health center or something like that,
The-
or a
the hope is-
library.
The hope is those areas that are designated wouldn't remain stagnant.
Correct, yeah, so,
Very good.
yeah,
Hope is usually positive.
Yeah.
yes. Mr. Black?
I have a couple questions.
Sure.
Have you people taken an inventory as to what plots, parcels, buildings and whatnot are already blighted within that
Yes.
redevelopment zone?
Yes.
Okay. Secondly, though it's not, it's almost a reverse of redlining, and I kind of disagree with you. Once when you designate an area as a blighted area, or as a redevelopment zone because it's a blighted area, not only do I believe that the real estate in that area would be depreciated, but also in the environs immediately near that area
Correct.
could be impacted negatively as well. And that
That's a good thing to say.
might make a lot of people underwater in their mortgages and whatnot, so I do have some concern on that. I hope that you studied that. Has there been any, it sounds like it hasn't really been studied.
Well, it's impossible to study it, honestly, unless you start doing appraisals. But I will tell you, 80% of the residential structures in this area are rentals. And a vast majority of those who own property don't owe mortgages. So underwater isn't much of a concern. Over the last 6 or 7 years, we have increased the amount of vacant parcels by almost 7% because we have been removing dilapidated housing. And that is a trend that does not increase property values. So in my experience, being in this for over 20 years, when people are interested in investing in an area, they want to know whether it's going up or down. A redevelopment plan done right shows investors that the community is going in the right place. Right now, there are no investors in this community whatsoever. And we've done multiple economic development studies that say you need a plan, you need to get it going, and in 20 years, things will change. I don't disagree with what you're saying. It's very difficult to prove either way at this point in time, but history, empirical knowledge, and other programs
The long term
across
would be beneficial,
across
is
the
what you're
state
saying, yeah.
have shown, again, New Bern waterfront, where the convention center is, where Skysail is, was a redevelopment area, was blighted, and was purchased by the redevelopment commission and redeveloped that way.
This is largely different though, because this is largely a residential where the other
Sure.
was more commercial.
All of them are different. Yeah.
This, has the redevelopment commission considered the public transportation that we are required in this area to provide as we've gone from an MPO to an,
Correct.
from an RPO, excuse me, to an MPO?
Yes. We're working on that. We've been working on that. We've been working on that for years before the redevelopment commission was formed, when the MPO was formed. Again, as you obviously know, Craven, the CARTS program had to kind of divide how they spent their time and money through an urban funding source from the federal government and then a rural funding source from the federal government. So this area is what's considered urban, so they have their own funding streams that have to deal with, urban issues. From that point, we're working with CARTS to study where the users are and where the users go and what kind of schedules those users would like to have so they can utilize the service more effectively and more efficiently. All those things, that will be taken up in the redevelopment plan.
I have voiced several times in this, and I think this redevelopment zone is a perfect example where many of our zoning requirements for off-street parking, where this would be residents that would take advantage of public transportation, that maybe some of those parking requirements may be eased for multiple unit housing.
Absolutely. We look at the parking requirements, especially for schools, health, any kind of non-residential. We don't have the square footage in this area to provide vast parking areas for places, so those are things that would be zoning changes. As again, 50% of the residents in this area own one car or no cars. So 50, so we're looking
That's
at.
one of the reasons why I have a problem with some of the
Mhm.
requirements that we're now requiring.
Mhm. I agree.
Well, thank you. Now, if I have specific questions about some parcels, I can call up you.
Absolutely. I welcome it. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions for Jeff? Okay. Well, thank you, Jeff.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, and since this is not a formal meeting, we don't need a vote to adjourn, so I'm simply going to adjourn us, unless we have anything else we need to
Unless we
discuss.
have
Okay?
Sure, thank you.
Thanks, everybody. We'll see you in January.
Unless we